Well, everyone, this is the penultimate spot for Season 2 of What If Giovanni Sponsored Ash. It's been a very long and hard road to get here, and there's just one more step to take after this one before the warning we've been giving you that this story and its characters will change forever.
Yep, that's right, Ronin. We're close to making good on that promise. In light of that, we want to take some time to give our heartfelt thanks to everyone who's made this story as popular and beloved as it's become. From Short Anime King, who's been handling our awesome mock anime intros, to AceTheWindRider aka RangerRider the Ranger Base, who's taken over the editing of some of the series' most critical parts to make sure they look as epic as we try to make them sound. To Pickled Dill and Dex Comics, who have both gone above and beyond in towing the line for this world's first spin-off series in What If May/Max were sponsored by Team Aqua/Magma, which remember you can find in the GSA series playlist and on their channel, as they've given a genuine shot at making a better story than the originator of this series, as they've gone on to elevate the level of scripting and editing to a whole new level. And finally, and especially to all of you for coming back and watching, liking, sharing, and commenting your thoughts so often. Speaking personally, I never thought this idea would take off as much as it had, since when it came down to it, I initially thought this story was just my take on the whole realistic Pokemon/edgy Ash being betrayed kind of genre that dominates most fanfiction of the series. But you guys have made this into something much bigger than just me or Ronin. So please, next time on the finale, be sure you stick to the end for another major announcement.
Now, with that said, please grab a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride as we show you the beginning of the end as you know it. Welcome to What If Giovanni Sponsored Ash, Season 2, Part 7, The World Turns to Ash. 2 days have passed since the raid on Team Rocket's base, since a small group of heroes made their mark on Kanto and the world beyond. Now it is time for them to do so again, though in an entirely different context. Now it is time for the Pokemon League. Or rather, it's almost time. The sun has not yet risen on the morning of the opening ceremony. Yet, one of those heroes, Gary Oak, is already hard at work, overseeing a sparring match between his Blastoise and Rhydon. Though this should be an easy victory for a starter, his recent experience with Giovanni's Rhyperior has given him some new ideas for how to train his bipedal rhinoceros. And though he hates to take any cues from the mobster, he wants all of his Pokemon in their best possible state, since he has a feeling something big is on the horizon. On the side, two figures watch on, Delia Ketchum and his grandfather, Professor Oak, with both Gary and Delia explaining to the professor what happened at the base. This is not the first time they have tried to tell his Gramps about the raid, but lately something about him has been off. His eyes have had a glassiness to them, and his mouth has remained perpetually ajar when not speaking, as if about to ask who he is again. As someone who loves him, to see a great man deteriorate so fast scares Gary, but all the same, he just tries to be patient with his Gramps, helping him in any way that he can. However, when the professor asks for further explanation of what happened to Ash, his tone one of befuddlement, the younger Oak cannot keep an edge of testiness from his voice, as he says he doesn't know. It's not like they had a big in-depth chat about his plans and the state of mind. All Ash said was he wasn't Ash, whatever that was supposed to mean. Then he did some hand wave and Giovanni croaked, or had a stroke or something. Best case scenario, Giovanni's really dead, and Ash is just doing whatever he did after New Island by trying to shoulder all of the stress like the noble blockhead he is. But sooner or later, he'll come back. Oak then asks what's the worst case scenario, but it is Delia who answers, stating that Ash really is gone, and the boy they met in the bowels of that awful place was merely wearing his face. The way she says this does not suggest she is proposing a scenario, but rather stating a fact that she believes with her whole heart. And as Gary turns to look at her, he wonders when the last time was that he saw her when her face wasn't lined with grief. Oak's expression also grows more down at these words, with him steepling his fingers and staring into them as if he might find a solution to all of their problems there. With nothing else to say, Gary returns to Rhydon and Blastoise, thanking them for a good effort and allowing them to take a break as he has Arcanine and Electabuzz come out. Though this time they are joined by a third Pokemon, Dragonair, who Gary wishes for the pair to mentor. Looking at the gifted dragon just makes Gary think of Lance. The champ had been livid when he had learned that Gary and his friends had planned and conducted an entire raid under his nose, thus stealing his chance to gain further glory. This had been what Gary wanted, though he had not anticipated the sheer depths of fury Lance possessed when his carefully crafted veneer finally cracked, howling and roaring like a dragon as he leveled accusations of collusion with known Team Rocket operatives like Ketchum and that boy, who Gary could only assume meant Silver. However, Gary had not faced the prospect of death or torture on New Island, and the potential of equally grim fates had the raid failed. So, the bluster of a charlatan in a cape did not intimidate him, with him telling Lance as much to the champion's shock. After that, he had packed his bags and left the Indigo Plateau, camping out in the plainlands of Route 23, with the vow that next time he saw Lance, it would be from across the battlefield as he took his title.
For the next few hours, Gary continues his training, rotating through his party members along with a couple of his reserves that he had his Gramps bring for him, wanting everyone to be ready for the League. Finally, a little before midday, Delia suggests he call a stop to the training, reminding him that they and the rest of his friends are meant to be meeting up for lunch at the Pokemon Center. Truthfully, Gary had not forgotten, but he cannot begrudge the woman her mothering, not after losing her only son twice, and so adopting a grateful smile, he feigns a forgetful laugh, oddly reminiscent of the Ash he once knew when they were just starting out, saying that he's glad she reminded him. Both of them know this isn't true, but it is easier to accept than the truth. So Delia gives him a weak smile and says he's very welcome, encouraging him to go have a shower since he doesn't want to look scruffy when he's on TV. At the Pokemon Center, the other heroes of the raid have already begun filing in. Richie, having traveled by the Battle Pyramid, is the first to arrive, Jigglypuff floating at his side, though neither are their usual exuberant selves, for Richie is still deep in contemplation, playing the events of the other night over in his head. Is there something he could have done different? If he and Silver had joined Ash in confronting Giovanni rather than splitting up, would that have stopped whatever happened to him from happening? And what did his friend mean when he told his mother that he wasn't himself? These questions plague him, though with the last one, there's also a degree of curiosity, a fact Richie feels deeply ashamed of, as he shouldn't feel the same way about the fate of one of his best friends as he does when Mr. Brandon shows him one of his archaeological finds. However, in spite of any feelings he may have around Ash, now is hardly the time to think about them, as his Pokemon worked really hard to earn him 8 badges, so now he must repay their efforts by doing his best in the League. Following not far behind him is Silver, and though not rare, his mood is also glum. However, unlike Richie, he is not plagued by a myriad of questions. Instead, he simply has one. Did that bastard Giovanni really win and make Ash into his successor, or is this somehow something even worse? Then there is Misty, who has no questions whatsoever, having come to a similar conclusion as Gary that this is more of Ash's usual behavior. However, unlike the Oak Boy, she is tired of having her emotions toyed with, of secrets and lies, and Ash think he can vanish without a word, and then still expect the people who care about him to be at his beck and call. So as far as she is concerned, Ash can get lost and take his enigmatic shtick with him. Then when he grows a bit of emotional awareness and realizes that his actions have impact on other people, that's when she'll start expending her emotional energy on him again. Finally, there is Brock, who knows nothing of the events of the raid, having only received a sudden stab of grief and a thought that was not his own, saying that Ash had left this world. At the time, he had put it down to simple intrusive thoughts born of worry for his friend, but he had noticed that since that moment, Bergmite has become withdrawn, not even headbutting him when he brings it his food. Now as he sees the friends assembled, all save for Ash, he realizes the truth for what it is, and so slumping into a booth in the Pokemon Center's dining room, he quietly asks them to tell him everything.
When they are done, Brock has slumped even deeper into his chair, muttering to himself that he should have been there. He should have done more. Laying a hand on his shoulder, Gary tells the Pewter City gym leader it's not his fault, while Silver adds him being there wouldn't have changed anything, since Ash was clearly playing an entirely different game from the rest of them. This does little to console Brock's guilt, however, as all the feelings from Ash's funeral come rushing back, sending him into a quagmire of despair. It is therefore a very solemn lunch that passes, and even Richie's attempts to raise everyone's spirits by reminding them it's finally time to compete in the league, the goal they've all worked so hard for, does little to lighten the mood. Following the meal, Professor Oak leads the group up to the Indigo Plateau, with him, Delia, and Brock heading through one door to enter the stands, while Silver, Misty, and Richie enter through another that will take them to the field. Gary alone waits outside the plateau, as Lance has arranged for him to be the final torch runner in this year's conference. No doubt, this was done as a PR move to make it about his protege, and by extension himself. But nonetheless, it is a tremendous honor, and not one Gary is about to pass up. A little while later, the second to last runner crosses the horizon, a young man with a Hitmonchan. And remembering his instructions, Gary brings out his partner Pokemon. However, this is where the young oak deviates from the plan, as instead of choosing Dragonair, he brings out Umbreon, who yips happily as they retrieve the torch and enter the arena.
Sprinting at top speed through the main entrance, the body of competitors and spectators blur past Gary as the wind whips his hair. In spite of all the bad stuff that's happened, in spite of the enemies both known and unknown, this right here is fun, and Gary allows himself his first genuine smile in ages. Then, he sees Ash. It is only for a moment, amidst a blurred mass of faces, but Gary is so sure of it that he comes to a sudden halt, doing a double take to the spot where he saw his erstwhile friend. However, now there is no sign of his fellow palette native. Richie is there, so maybe it was him he saw, since they do kinda look alike. But Gary had been so certain in that moment that it was Ash. A second later, the Oak remembers himself, and that the entirety of the Indigo Stadium, as well as TV viewers around the world are watching it, and so attempting to cover for his unexplained stop, he begins to sprint again, his eyes solely set on the central torch. Soon, he reaches the large stone staircase leading up to the burner, and taking them one at a time with Umbreon at his side, he soon reaches the top, lighting the grand torch and officially opening this year's Indigo Plateau Conference.
From the announcer's box, Mr. Goodshow declares as much, though this is not only an announcement, as he begins a speech about how even with the recent calamities and scandals, he is pleased to see the bright future of the region represented by the competitors here today, encouraging them to battle their hardest, but most importantly, to compete with honor and pride, since a Pokemon Master is not determined by their power, but by their heart. All the same, he is excited to see what battles will unfold, as this year they will not only be joined by their esteemed Elite Four and the hero of Kanto himself, Lance the Dragon Master, but also by very three special guests. A spotlight then falls upon the viewing box that Gary has so often occupied, along with the Elite Four when Lance was doing his exhibition matches. Now the four thrones are filled by Lance, along with an older man with a more extreme version of flaming hair, and a pair of women, one with blonde hair and a regal bearing, and the other with icy blue hair and eyes that can only be described as mirthfully predatory. Mr. Goodshow introduced these guests as Karen, the champion of Johto, Cynthia, the champion of Sinnoh, and Alder, the champion of Unova. And as each stand at their name, they are met with thunderous applause. Mr. Goodshow taking the opportunity to once again thank them for attending since their own leagues were out of season. With the big announcement out of the way, Mr. Goodshow continues his speech, but down on the pitch, the true heroes of Kanto have already tuned him out. Something far more pressing is on their minds. Gary's sudden stop in the middle of his torch run, and the weird look he had on his face when he did it. Silver, having picked up quite a bit from Looker's mentorship, has no trouble interpreting that look, since it was one of pure surprise, and only one thing could force such a reaction from the usually calm and collected Oak Boy. Ash is here. Telling that to his friends, they all agree to split up and find him, since if what Gary saw was true, they cannot afford to let this chance for answers slip through their fingers. While Misty and Richie attempt to be subtle in their investigation, Silver is in no mood for more games, and so takes off at a run, eyes scanning the faces of the other 255 competitors to see which one of them is Ash. In such a crush of bodies, recognition is all but impossible, or so Silver thinks, until an arm darts out to catch him around the collar. Spinning in place, the young redhead finds himself staring into the sneering face of AJ, with the green-haired boy scowling that it looks like Silver's in a rush for something, before adding that he hopes he didn't just come between him and whatever his goal is.
Forcefully extracting himself from AJ's grip, Silver bluntly states that if this is about the SSN tournament, and AJ still holding some grudge, then they can talk it through later. But unless the other boy's seen Ash, he doesn't have time for this. AJ glowers at these words, both due to the brush off and the fact that he doesn't understand what sort of trick Silver's playing by acting like Ash is still alive. All the same, he spits that he doesn't want to talk. He wants to get payback by crushing him here at the league. And if by some fluke Ketchum does turn up, he'll take him out too. A hint of his old cockiness creeping into his voice. Silver wishes AJ good luck with that, knowing that even Ash's weakest Pokemon could beat this blowhard, before returning to his search, now a little more subdued as to avoid having to reunite with any other old enemies. This in turn gives Silver an idea. If Ash doesn't want to be seen, he probably wouldn't be intermingled with the crowd, and so turning his gaze outward rather than inward, he spots him hiding in plain sight, on one of the more secluded entryways to the battlefield. Wasting no time, Silver runs over to Ash, signaling with his hand so as he goes, Richie and Misty will see it and join him. When the trio converge on Ash, he meets their eyes, a calm detachment as if there is nothing at all odd about this reunion. This coyness infuriates Silver, who slams a hand into the concrete wall Ash is leaning against, his voice quivering with barely suppressed fury as he demands Ash come out with it. All of it. No more secrets or half-truths, or clever little wordings that sound like they may mean one thing but really mean another. They just want the truth, the honest truth, since they're his friends, and they want to help him, but they can only do that if he stops holding them at arm's length. Without a word, Ash turns his unfeeling eyes on Silver. They are so unlike the eyes that used to speckle with a zeal for everything that the redhead is almost taken aback. And when Ash finally does decide to speak, it is in that same flat tone he used at the rocket base, as he muses that yes, what he once was did view them as his friends. Her own temper flaring now, Misty tells Ash to cut the "what I once was" Toro's crap, since she doesn't buy it. If he's really not Ash, then why is he still here competing at the League? Still in that placid tone, Ash responds that the League meant so much to the person he was before, that to forsake it now would be to forsake a piece of himself. And more than that, it allows him to keep a promise that Ash Ketchum made to his friends. Before he can move on with his true mission, he is honor-bound to fulfill Ash's promises.
Literally shaking with frustration now, Silver asks what that mission might be, but with the slightest hint of sorrow coloring his otherwise neutral tone, Ash states that Silver would not understand. None of them would. He then lays a hand on Silver's chest and summons a small burst of psychic energy, pushing him back, just enough that he can extract himself, heading for the exit. Furiously, Misty and Silver order him to come back, since they are not done, while Richie more gently urges him to return to them so they can talk this through. However, Ash ignores all three of them, only looking back to tell them one thing, that if they wish to honor Ash as he does, they must come at him with everything they have, since it's only through a true battle of equals that they will achieve Ash's dream. With these enigmatic words, he vanishes, teleporting away as he did at the end of their last meeting, leaving Misty, Silver, and Richie feeling as though they have lost him all over again. From their seats in the stands, Brock, Delia, and Professor Oak also watch on, having witnessed the entire exchange. Even if they could not hear what was said over Mr. Goodshow's speech, at the sight of Ash leaving again, Delia and Bergmite both break down in tears, while on her left, Brock grits his teeth, and on her right, Oak sighs, looking like a man who can see the sticky end coming but is powerless to stop it.
Despite their best efforts, the group cannot find any sign of Ash after this, searching the entire Indigo Plateau until they are finally forced to accept that he teleported away to wherever he's been lying low since the raid. Though they want to keep looking just in case, Gary, Misty, Richie, and Silver know that soon the first round will be beginning, and unless they attend the matches, all their hard work will have been for nothing. And besides, if Ash really is here to compete, climbing up the tournament ladder is their best chance to cross past him again. Heading to the Pokemon Center, they are informed that the prelims will be broken down into 4 rounds, each on a different battlefield, with one being water-based, one being rock, one being grasslands, and one being ice. A good balance of biomes that will force trainers to adapt to their surroundings. Misty is naturally excited to try her hand at the water battlefield, while Richie grins that after working with Mr. Brandon, rock will probably be where his Pokemon are most at home. Silver and Gary say nothing, far more interested in the matchups flashing on screen, seeing that at least for now, none of them are being paired up against each other. As it turns out, Misty will be the first amongst them to battle, having the third battle on the water field, and seeing that their own first round matches aren't scheduled until a bit later in the day, Silver, Richie, and Gary all agree to spectate, with Gary also offering to inform his Gramps, Miss Ketchum, and Brock so they can all come and cheer her on as well. Misty thanks her friends for this, though the mood does dampen somewhat when they see Ash's face flash up on screen to denote his match. And worst of all, it is at the same time as Gary and Richie's first rounds, meaning they are split between confronting their former friend again or supporting one another. Wisely, Richie suggests they leave Ash alone for now, allowing them to focus on their own league runs, an idea everyone agrees with as they head off to the water field to support Misty.
Stepping onto the pitch, Misty is introduced to her opponent, a young man known as the Astounding Mandy, though in truth, the only thing she finds astounding about him is how astoundingly awful his fashion sense is. Swept back green hair under a red headband, a pink blazer paired with a yellow ascot, blue cummerbunds and lurid pea pants, and a low-cut white shirt leaves very little to the imagination. All the same, the announcer does declare Mandy as the odds-on favorite to win this year, and so the spunky redhead makes a note of this, not to take him lightly. Meanwhile, Misty herself is introduced as the waterflower of the Cerulean City Gym, much to the amusement of Mandy, who sneers that if she's a water specialist, he knows just the Pokemon to use, calling forth his Exeggutor. Gritting her teeth, Misty vows to show him the true strength of water types, bringing out her Poliwrath, much to the shock of everyone, especially Mandy, who taunts that she could have just not shown up if she wanted to forfeit already, since it would be less of a waste of his time than demolishing a water fighting type. With her temper flaring, the daughter of Cerulean snarls that they'll see if he's still smirking when she's done, ordering a water pulse. Manifesting an orb of water in its hands, Poliwrath fires the attack at Exeggutor, but Mandy doesn't even bother having it to dodge, instead enduring the hit, then teasing that this little girl needs to go home and brush up on her type matchups. His grass psychic type is resistant to everything her water fighting type can throw at it. This match is already over. From the stands, Richie worriedly asked why Misty would make such a big mistake right out of the gate, with Silver musing that some of the strongest trainers will crack under the pressure of the competition setting. Oak, however, is more hopeful, saying he believes Misty knew the risk and took it anyway as a matter of pride, wanting to prove that even with every disadvantage, her Pokemon could still rise to the occasion. Clutching her hands to her chest, Delia breathes that she hopes the professor is right, lapsing into silence as the battle continues down below.
Wanting to show that his Pokemon can attack just as effectively as it can defend, Mandy now calls for a Psy Wave, a blade of psionic energy shooting out from it and slicing across the water as it zeroes in on Poliwrath. Knowing how bad this would be for her boxing tadpole, Misty orders it to leap into the water, a feat Poliwrath is more than up for, diving into the pool just as the Psy Waves cleaves the platform it had been standing on in half. Using its powerful limbs, Poliwrath kicks off from the debris, swinging beneath Exeggutor's platform, then bursting out from underneath, managing to lift the heavy disc and the Pokemon standing atop it high above its head. And with a hearty roar, it tosses Exeggutor into the air, while Misty grins that it's time to see how much the palm tree enjoys swimming. However, even now, Mandy does not lose his cool, calling for a Psychic. At once, a faint aura glows around Exeggutor, stopping its fall and allowing it to glide gracefully over to another platform. With a sympathetic groan, the announcer says that's gotta hurt, since it looks like Misty went all in on that plan and it still backfired. Nonetheless, Misty is undeterred, telling Poliwrath to try another water pulse. Due to being in the water, this attack charges quicker and is far larger, with the watery spear being half the size of Exeggutor as it hurtles towards it. Figuring this might actually push Exeggutor off its platform, or at least close enough to the edge that it might capsize, Mandy calls for an egg bomb to counter this, with the coconut Pokemon dutifully launching an egg at the orb, causing both to meet in midair and explode, spraying water everywhere. Mandy then orders Exeggutor to end this farce with another egg bomb, and as Exeggutor lobs another egg, this time directly at Poliwrath, the tadpole Pokemon is told to dive deep to avoid the attack. Spotting its shadow under the water, Mandy tells Exeggutor to keep using egg bombs until it's taking care of Poliwrath, resulting in a brutal bombing run as the grass type attempts to blow its opponent out of the water. Thankfully, Poliwrath is fast, or at least faster than Exeggutor, and so is able to stay one step ahead of the egg bombs, closing on an Exeggutor at Misty's command and literally swimming circles around it. With each failed egg bomb, more and more water is sent into the air, drenching Mandy and Exeggutor. And this is exactly what Misty wants, as when she is convinced Exeggutor is sufficiently doused, she tells Poliwrath to surface and use Ice Punch. With the speed and force of a torpedo, Poliwrath bursts from the water, and with a determined expression in its eyes, socks Exeggutor across all three jaws. This causes the grass psychic to wobble on its strong legs, and due to the ice energy bathing its fists, this is also super effective. But more importantly, thanks to the water covering Exeggutor from head to toe, the secondary effect is instantaneous, as it is flash frozen before Mandy can order a counter. From the sideline, the referee, who Misty suddenly realizes is Koga, raises a flag, disqualifying Exeggutor due to the league's rule that a Pokemon who is completely immobilized, such as asleep or frozen, is unable to battle. Scowling, Mandy recalls his grass type, darkly muttering that Misty got lucky, but Lady Luck won't favor her twice, as he brings out his own master of the deep, Seadra.
For a brief moment, Misty can't help but marvel at how beautiful the water type is, but is brought back to focus when Mandy goes on an offensive this time, having Seadra use Whirlpool. At once, the calm waters of the pool become choppy, then transform into a full-on maelstrom as Seadra dashes around in a circle, whipping them up. This also causes the platform Poliwrath is standing on to be caught up in the storm, being tugged closer and closer to the center of the whirlpool, where Seadra awaits, a menacing expression on its face. Cackling, Mandy declares that her little tadpole can't swim so easily when the water is a bit more rough, can it? But Misty grins that there's more to being a master of water types than just swimming. She then tells Poliwrath to use Submission, and taking a running leap, the water type dives from the safety of its platform before curling into a ball. However, instead of dive bombing into the water as Mandy had anticipated, Poliwrath begins to spin in midair, picking up as much momentum that when it hits the water, it is fast enough to roll atop rather than sink. Suddenly, the sucking current of the whirlpool has gone from a hindrance to a help. As like a marble on the track, Poliwrath just keeps gaining speed as it rolls deeper in, until finally it collides with Seadra, who at this point is too close to get away. The force of this hit sends both Pokemon soaring into the air, but unlike with Ash's Kingdra, Mandy clearly hasn't taught his Seadra how to move outside of the water, leaving it completely vulnerable for her follow-up attack, a powerful Ice Punch that sends it soaring back down into the water with a heavy splash, before surfacing moments later, its eyes now spirals. Mandy's final Pokemon is a Golbat, but due to sharing Exeggutor's ice weakness, all it takes is a single Ice Punch to knock it out and clinch the first round for Misty. Gary, Silver, and Richie all have similarly easy, albeit not quite as spectacular victories as their friend, and so it is that when evening falls they all converge at the Pokemon Center to congratulate each other. Brock, Oak, and Delia also add their praises, but Brock apologizes that he couldn't witness their matches in person, since he was only told today that the gym leaders had been conscripted to act as referees for their league. Officially, this is a reward for all their hard work, with the ones who do the best job being offered a chance to battle the Elite Four. But Brock suspects it's an excuse to gather them all in one place, so the League Association can keep an eye on them for any hints of corruption. Concern on her face, Misty goes to ask if that means her sisters will be here and also under suspicion, but before she can get the words out, Oak cuts her off, smiling that yes, the 4 challengers are all exemplary young trainers who could give him a run for his money in his heyday, his mind clearly having not fully caught up with the conversation. A smirking voice then taunts that this was very long ago, wasn't it, Samuel? And to the surprise of no one, when they turn to look, they see Agatha, having snuck up behind Oak, just like one of her feared ghost types. Smiling at her placidly, the old man replies that even the brightest flames must fade one day, and as one who in his time shone rather brightly, it is his time to fade just as rapidly. It is the way of things. Giving her former rival a deep searching look, Agatha solemnly asks if it was worth it, saying that had he chosen a different road, he could have lasted much longer, but with a shake of his head, the professor states that he does not mourn for what he does not have, for what he does is much more worth it. In that moment, Oak seems like himself again, whole and wise rather than frazzled and confused. But like the flame to which he compared his life, it is promptly snuffed out, and in an instant he seems older and frailer once again.
For a moment, no one says anything. Then, as if feeling obligated to draw the attention away from what was just said, Agatha turns a piercing eye to Silver, chiding that she didn't see him use Gengar in his first match, and tutting that she hopes he isn't squandering her kindness, keeping his tone neutral as not to give the old crone anything new to pick apart, while smiling the way he feels one would to their grandmother. Silver states that he's saving Gengar for when it really counts, a decision Agatha can respect, instructing him to work hard. She then turns to leave, before seemingly remembering something, and looking back at Silver once more, saying that she was just speaking with her replacement, and he would like for the redhead to visit his chamber tomorrow after his match. Puzzled, Gary asks what Pierce would want with Silver, but Agatha reproachfully says it's rude to pry into the affairs of others, calling him so very much like Samuel, while Silver furrows his brow, having no idea why an Elite Four member would summon him. All the same, after tomorrow morning's match, another easy win thanks to Magnezone sturdy steel type, allowing it to take out 2 of the opponent's 3 Pokemon. Silver has Gary lead him to the private area of the Indigo Plateau, reserved for the Elite Four and their guests. Mercifully, Lance is not around, though Lorelei and Bruno do give the redhead weary looks from on high, as he steps into this most vaunted of chambers. However, before they can give him or his friend any grief, the form of Pierce the Enigma swans into view. At the sight of them, the other 2 elites depart, leaving just the long-haired man and the 2 boys. In his usual stoic manner, Pierce thanks Gary for escorting Silver, though requests they be left alone. And when Silver gives a nod to say he'll be okay, the young oak takes his lead, as the remaining pair make their way up the stairs into Pierce's quarters. The room is large and spacious, though rather Spartan, with Pierce's decorating style clearly favoring minimalism verging on the extreme, as the only objects occupying the room are practical ones, such as a bed, dresser, kitchenette, and a healing machine for his Pokemon. Seeing this, Silver assumes that Pierce is not one for small talk, and so bluntly comes out and asks why he has been summoned here. Casually, Pierce responds that he's here to discuss father, to which Silver a little sardonically asks his father Pierce's, feeling annoyed that of course, even after all he's done to get to the league, all people see when they look at him is Giovanni. However, Pierce chooses a third option, their father.
A little taken aback, Silver asks if that means, but before he can finish, Pierce nods, stating that Giovanni is also his father, while his mother is none other than Matori. At last, Ariana's words about Matori's brat make sense, and so, going on the defense, Silver demands to know if his half-brother is angry he helped take down the old bastard or something. Coyly, Pierce replies that it is quite the opposite. He and their father never truly aligned philosophies, and he is pleased to have definitive proof now that Giovanni's ideology of power was flawed. Hostility lessening, Silver asks if that means Pierce isn't in Team Rocket, Rocket, but Pierce replies that for a seemingly smart boy, Silver asks a lot of pointless questions, since regardless of his alliance, he would still answer no to a junior detective of the International Police. Speaking of Interpol, he was wondering if Silver happens to know where their father is, since plainly the police do not have him. Otherwise, they would have made the arrest public, nor could the raid have failed, for if it did, then its occurrence would not have been acknowledged. Therefore, he must assume that Giovanni was defeated, but somehow eluded capture. And as one of the people who was present at the raid, if anyone would know how that happened and where Giovanni is presently, it would be Silver. Truthfully, Silver admits that he doesn't know, though he can confirm the old bastard was defeated, and from the looks of things, he won't be coming back. This actually earns a small smile from Pierce, as he calls this good, saying it is long past the time for the old to move aside so the next generation can claim what is theirs by right, before adding that rather than be in competition for each other, like Giovanni would have wanted, perhaps they should stake their claim together as brothers. Try as he might not to judge Pierce for being Giovanni's son, as so many have done to him, Silver can't help but be reminded of words he often heard growing up from Team Rocket's members, who heralded him as their Prince Rocket, and so, with an edge of suspicion, asks why Pierce would go to all the effort for him. Seeing this distrust, Pierce returns to his natural tone and expression, replying that it is because he is the only family that Silver has left, or at least the only family who wants anything to do with him. A while later, Silver departs the inner sanctum of the Indigo Plateau, returning to the main area in order to watch Richie's second round match. He and his opponent are both down to their last Pokemon, and with mild surprise, Silver recognizes the other combatant from the SSN tournament. It is Joe from Poketech. Wisely, due to the grass battlefield, Richie has gone with Dusa, his Tangrowth, who has made excellent usage of the terrain, laying down roots and allowing them to replenish her health. However, this has come at a cost of being forced to remain stationary, which, in a battle, can be detrimental, especially when facing a highly mobile opponent such as a Scyther.
Politely, Joe says that he's sorry to have to end Richie's league run here, but he made a promise that he'd grow strong, so he has to win it all. All smiles. Richie says it's no problem, though he hopes there will be no hard feelings when he wins, since he also has a promise to keep, so he can't lose here. Smiling as well, Joe affably agrees that they'll both fight their hardest, and may the best man win, a sentiment Richie fully agrees with, as they resume their clash. Having the speed advantage, Joe's Scyther acts first, starting with agility to further enhance his movement, then rushing in, slashing at the massive vines that is Dusa, then retreating with equally fast movements. All this super effective damage makes the grass type howl, but still smiling, Richie urges her to stay calm and get ready for the next wave. Warbling her understanding, Dusa braces herself and Scyther once more dashes forward, its twin blades whirling like dervishes. However, this time as its blade pierces the vines on Dusa's arm, they immediately reknit, forming over Scyther's weapons, locking it in place. Nervously, Joe asks what's going on, but Richie simply replies that now both Pokemon are stuck in place, and even the fastest Pokemon in the world can't avoid a hit if they can't move. To prove this point, when Richie calls for a power whip, Dusa draws her other fist back, then swings it into Scyther's jaw.
However, due to the somewhat amorphous nature of the grass type's body, this hit doesn't stop there, instead staying with Scyther as it is blown back, the vines of Dusa's arm simply extending further and further, so that as the bug flyer crashes into the arena wall, it is still with Dusa's fist planted squarely on its cheek. Despite this move not being very effective on paper, Dusa's raw power is more than enough to take out Scyther in one hit, and as Joe pulls out a notepad and paper, jotting down all he has learned from his match, Richie is crowned the winner. From his seat, Silver smiles for his friend. The two of them have made it down to the double digits, now being in the top 64, though there's still a long way to go before this tournament can come to an end. Thankfully, the next day's matches, as well as the ones on the day after that, are similarly manageable for the group of kids who are forced into the fires of New Island and the Rocket Raid, meaning that by mid-afternoon on the fourth day of the Indigo Conference, Richie, Silver, and Misty have all passed the preliminaries, securing themselves spots in the top 16. Finally, it is time for Gary's top 32 match, facing off against a girl named Melissa on the rock field. Erica is reffing this one, while Brock, having been offered first, but chosen to recuse himself due to his friendship with Gary, and so it is that he, Oak, Delia, Richie, Silver, and Misty watch on from the stands, cheering for their friend to make it to the finals. As with all preliminary matches, the rules are the same, 3v3 with no substitutions, and after Erica finishes explaining them, she flips a coin, determining that Melissa will choose first. Nodding, the aqua-haired girl opens with Aggron, clearly hoping to capitalize on its high defense to keep Gary at bay.
However, being the grandson of the regional professor, Gary knows the chink in Aggron's armor, both literally and figuratively. And that is, its defensive prowess only applies to physical injuries, not those inflicted through elemental attacks. He also knows that of these attacks, water would be the most devastating, though most would still not think to use water moves, as they are only super effective when Aggron is quad weak to both fighting and ground moves. But as those are physically inclined types, those quad weaknesses are in fact a trap, a seemingly easy win to lull the unsuspecting into playing on Aggron's terms. Gary will not fall for such a ruse, and so opens with Blastoise, trusting in his water typing to carry him through, while also resisting Aggron's steel moves. This earns him no words from his opponent, though she does give him the slightest quirk of her eyebrow as if to say, so you at least are not a fool. Having chosen first, Melissa is also given the first move, having Aggron use Rock Tomb, likely wanting to restrict Blastoise's mobility so it can wail on it without opposition. However, Gary has no intention of granting Melissa an early lead, ordering a Protect which results in a bubble of energy forming around the water starter and blowing away the stony pillars that had suddenly jutted up around it. Grinning, Gary then goes on the attack, having Blastoise launch a Twin Jet Hydro Pump which strikes hard against Aggron, driving it into one of the stones that line the field. Though not enough to down the Iron Armor Pokemon, the move does elicit a cheer from the crowd, with the announcer declaring this a massive blow to the defensive tank, though hardly unexpected from the protege of the champ. By now, Gary is used to being reduced to his relationship with others, be they Ash, Oak, or Lance, and so pays this comment no mind, until a new voice adds his thoughts to the commentators. Lance himself.
Though the words he says are kind and full of praise, Gary, who has spent so long by his side, can hear the underlining fury, and as he turns to look up at the commentator's box, he sees Lance staring down at him, those hateful eyes alight with the unspoken reminder that they are in his territory, now more than ever. Gary is the Dragon Master's prop, though he had known that this would be the case on an intellectual level from the moment he had accepted the torch. This is the first time it has hit emotionally that Lance's eyes are ever present in this place, and it sends a chill down his spine, making him think of what Ash must have endured during all this time under Giovanni's thumb. All this culminates in a moment of distraction, and in a high-level competition such as this, a moment can make all the difference. By now, Aggron has recovered from the Hydro Pump, and seeing his guard lowered, Melissa has it used its secret weapon. Thunder. Thanks to all of the water trailing along the battlefield in the aftermath of the water attacks, Thunder has a clear path to Blastoise, arcing along it faster than the Titanic tortoise can react, and bathing it in an agonizing yellow glow. This lasts for several moments, with Blastoise howls of pain being what draws Gary's attention back to the present. But by the time he tries to do anything, it is already too late, with the water starter crashing down on its belly, where it lies unconscious. Pursing his lips, Gary apologizes to his old friend, promising not to make the same mistake twice. Then, with a renewed fire in his eyes, recalls Blastoise and replaces it with his other starter, Rhydon. This is a risky play, considering the Rhino's weakness to steel moves, and the aforementioned trap of fighting an Aggron with physical moves. But this is where Gary's special training comes in, as before Melissa can even breathe a word to her Pokemon, it is already on its back, having fallen prey to a devastating hammer arm lariat. Rhydon then follows up with a bulldoze in the form of an elbow drop, as it leaps atop Aggron, making the steely sentinel scream. This is what Gary had learned from the battle with Proton. The ability to limit or control an opponent's movement is a valuable and dangerous skill to have, and so this is what he and Rhydon have been working on for the last few days, focusing on applying her moves in new ways that lock her foes down, leaving them vulnerable for a finisher. And this is exactly the state Aggron finds itself in, as Rhydon lifts the battered behemoth over its head before bringing its soft underbelly down on its horn, which has begun spinning as it powers up a fierce drill run. For a moment, there is a sharp grinding sound. Then, at last, Aggron grows limp, laying unconscious in the arms of Rhydon, while the commentator, with awe in his voice, dubs her the Heavenly Drill.
Recalling Aggron, Melissa admits that Rhydon is an impressive specimen of its species, before bringing out a cute Wigglytuff, seemingly the opposite of the intimidating steely monster she just used. However, they are in fact more similar than one might think, as their bulky bodies can soak up a lot of hits, while also dealing a fair amount of special damage. Recognizing this, Gary decides that his best bet will be to use close quarters combat this time, telling Rhydon to use Hammer Arm to open up once more. Unfortunately, there is a lot of field to cover between where Rhydon is and Wigglytuff, and as she begins her charge, she is assailed by a volley of water pulses. Unlike Misty's Poliwrath, these are not fired head on, but instead lobbed like water balloons into the air. A clever strategy that splits Gary and Rhydon's focus between avoiding the incoming hits and analyzing the trajectory of each new one to ensure they aren't stumbling blindly into their path. This results in a slightly slower and more circuitous route, granting Wigglytuff more opportunities to get in that all-essential lucky hit, and unsurprisingly, it does, striking right on 3 times with falling water pulses before she even crosses half the battlefield. To the Heavily Drill's credit, she keeps charging in spite of the quad effective damage, though even the toughest Pokemon cannot endure 4 quad damaging moves in a row, and as that 4th water pulse strikes, she finally falls forward, skidding to a stop inches from Wigglytuff. With a smile, Gary thanks Rhydon for her effort, recalling the rock ground type and readying his final Pokemon. Originally, he had planned for this to be Arcanine, but seeing the danger those water pulses pose, he reconsiders, drawing inspiration from his so-called mentor and bringing forth Dragonair for the first time at the conference. The beautiful servant's emergence is met with oohs and ahs from the crowd, as the announcer grins that here it is, Gary's ace Pokemon gifted by the champ. He also calls this timing proof of the bond between master and student, as he'd surely held off until he knew Lance was watching. Briefly, Gary is glad that this last year has had a humbling effect on him, for he is sure that the old him would have been unable to resist telling this know-nothing talking head to cram it. But he has more important things to focus on, like winning, not for Lance like these people think, but in spite of him, so he can knock that egotistic fraud off his perch.
Locking eyes with Dragonair, he calls for a dragon dance. The Skyworm begins to perform an intricate dance, while around it, a faint dragonic aura begins to glow. However, Wigglytuff isn't staying idle during this time, and at Melissa's command, fires a barrage of super effective draining kisses, in the hopes of knocking it out and ending this match. Worriedly, the announcer suggests that this could be the end of Lance's protege, the tiniest hint of doubt in the Dragon Master's teaching ability leaking in his voice. But Gary remains cool-headed as ever, telling Dragonair to repeat the dance. This time, Dragonair's movements are much faster and more fluid, easily dodging the pink kiss marks flying at it, and even causing a few to collide with each other in a display of pink fireworks. Those familiar with the format can't help but be reminded of a contest battle, though this thought is soon forgotten as something even more dramatic draws their attention. Gary's call for an extreme speed. At once, Dragonair vanishes, only to appear a second later on the other side of the field, its horn planted squarely in Wigglytuff's stomach. Now it is Wigglytuff's turn to vanish in a burst of speed as it rematerializes on the side of the arena wall, concrete cracking all around it. Before a moment later, the sound of the impact follows, due to Dragonair having seemingly surpassed the speed of sound with that last attack. Obviously, this is enough to knock out Wigglytuff, and so Melissa moves on to her final Pokemon, Golem, a good, sturdy fighter whose resistance to normal moves should make that extreme speed strategy null and void. Curiously, Gary asks if Golem's ability is sturdy, to which Melissa replies that it is, asking why the young man wanted to know. A slight cocky grin on his face, Gary replies that he wanted Dragonair to hear it, so it doesn't feel bad when it takes 2 hits to beat Golem, to which the aqua-haired girl asks if Gary really thinks he can beat her strongest Pokemon in just 2 hits. Grin growing, the young oak shakes his head that he doesn't think that at all. He knows it. Once more, Gary's Dragonair moves at such speeds that the human sight can't keep up as it appears in front of Golem. However, this time, it does not strike with extreme speed, instead allowing its tail to glow with the same bright dragonic aura bathing the rest of it before lashing out of its tail. This singular hit is enough to send Golem flying backwards, but instead of soaring towards the wall like Wigglytuff, Golem is sent crashing into the pillars of rocks dotting the battlefield, perfectly bouncing off of each of them before being sent into another. Occasionally, this sends it hurtling into the path of Dragonair, but instead of attacking it, Gary has the dragon Pokemon zip out of the way, allowing Golem to continue the path of demolition. Finally, this results in all of the pillars being toppled, and it is only when this happens that Gary orders Dragonair to use another attack, Dragon Tail, once again.
Suddenly, Dragonair appears above Golem, easily able to match the speed at which it is flying uncontrollably, as it once more ignites its tail before bringing it down on Golem's head. This not only takes down the rock turtle, but also flattens the field, as a massive sonic boom born of the attack clears away any debris of the fallen rocky outcrops. It only takes a few seconds for Erica to confirm Gary's victory, and as he is applauded by all, the announcer weakly chuckles that he's glad this is the last match on the rock field, since he thinks it'll take quite some time to repair all the damage Dragonair dealt to it. Heading out into the afternoon sun, Gary is greeted by his grandpa, Delia, and his friends, who all praise him for his awesome match. Smiling, Gary thanks them, suggesting they head over to one of the restaurants for an early dinner before the lines get too long. But it seems Richie has other ideas, as his attention is transfixed on something else. Following his eyes, Gary and the others quickly find what Richie is so engrossed with, one of the giant TVs dotting the plaza which shows Ash in the middle of a battle. Wordlessly, the friends all share a look that says they have come to the same conclusion. All their battles are done for the day, and they know where Ash is going to be for the next while. They want to try and get answers out of him. This is their best chance.
Rushing over to the ice battlefield, they find Ash having taken out his opponent's first Pokemon with seemingly no trouble, though this is hardly as surprising as the identity of the upset opponent. It is AJ. It seems the green-haired boy has gotten his wish to battle Ash after all, though things are hardly going his way, as despite the insults he hurls at Ash, the Pallet Town native isn't biting. In fact, he hasn't said a single word throughout this fight, not even ordering Meowth, who appears to be acting on his own. However, on closer inspection, Silver does notice something. Just before the Scratch Cat attacks, a sudden look of understanding crosses his eyes, which Silver can deduce is the hallmark of telepathy. AJ's second Pokemon is Rapidash, which he taunts Ash that he wouldn't have seen him trade for, as it was after his part of the tournament was finished. Having traveled with Meowth for the longest, Misty can almost anticipate the smart-ass comment he is about to make about how what AJ really means is after he flunked out. But surprisingly, the cat says nothing of the sort. In fact, he says nothing at all, having a subdued air about him that comes through with a slight dropping of his whiskers. Instead, he simply focuses on the fight, extending his claws and lunging at the mighty unicorn with a Night Slash. However, much to the cat's misfortune, Rapidash is faster, and so, as its horn glows, it lowers its head and rams said horn into Meowth's soft underbelly.
This puts a halt to his attack, and even sends him flying back before crashing down hard on the ice. Even now, Ash's expression isn't passive, as he coolly surveys his partner's prone form, and when the normal type rises to his feet, brushing slush off his fur like nothing happened. It is with a borderline inaudible undertone of dark muttering that at least his boss would ask if he was okay, but he guesses the new management can just peek into his head and find out. Not like that's a violation of privacy or nothing. Not hearing any of this, AJ instead orders Rapidash to use Flame Charge, giving it a whip across the flank for extra motivation. As planned, this sets the unicorn to charge so fast that it is not impeded by the frozen field and melted beneath its hooves, while around it, an aura of flame alights. Once more, Meowth receives a psychic order, and clearly one that he doesn't like, with him shooting Ash a look of, really? But all the same he complies, attempting to jump over Rapidash's charging figure. However, no matter how dedicated, a 1-foot tall cat will have trouble to leap over a horse standing over 5 foot. And so, very unsurprisingly, Meowth's lower body being almost completely consumed in flame sees him crying, "Fuck, that's hot!"
This elects a collective gasp from the audience, though whether it's at the sight of a talking Pokemon or one that is so foul-mouthed, it is anyone's guess. Even AJ is shaken, pointing at Meowth like he's some sort of monster and asking if he can really talk. Letting out a heavy sigh, Meowth admits that it looks like the him is out of the bag. Oh well, though these folks ought to know that talking isn't his only skill. He also is one heck of a fighter. He then flashes his claws, and as Rapidash exits its flame charge, he throws himself onto the horse, with the pair of them becoming a cartoon-esque dust cloud. When it clears, only one of them is standing, and it is Meowth, triumphantly aside the beaten body of Rapidash. Recalling Rapidash, AJ brings out his final Pokemon, and it is Sandslash. Curiously, Meowth asks why the mouse Pokemon isn't a Sandshrew no more, and when Sandslash gives a sad chitter, Meowth's expression curdles as he levels a glare at AJ, saying trading away a pal is already crossing the line, but forcing his partner to evolve against its will and give up its dreams of being the best Sandshrew is downright awful, and a piece of work like him doesn't deserve a Pokemon. AJ's only response is to crack his whip at the normal type's feet, forcing him to jump back before doing the same to Sandslash, snapping at it to stop standing around and finish the stupid cat. As Surge, who is serving as the match's referee, barks AJ not to do that again or risk disqualification, Sandslash raises its claws, a melancholy air to it as it prepares to fight for its trainer. With a sigh, Meowth does likewise, saying that he totally understands and won't hold any hard feelings against the mouse. The pair then dive at each other, both their paws slipping on the icy ground. It is not a graceful duel, nor is it a spectacle worthy of the ages. It is a short and brutal slugfest, with each taking a hit, then retaliating with one of their own, one after another, until both are panting and leaning on each other to stay standing. Neither are in a great state, but in spite of having fought 2 battles prior, Meowth remains in better condition, and so, in a soft voice, tells Sandslash to go to sleep before pushing it lightly and sending it crashing on its back with spiraled eyes. Howling with rage and distress, AJ hurls a tirade of insults at Sandslash, whipping the poor defenseless creature across its back. On the other side of the field, anger swells in Ash's eyes, and in a voice magnified by psychic powers, he states that he once had a master like AJ, cruel, concerned only with power and in need of a lesson. He then snaps his fingers, and at once Sandslash's eyes burst open, now with a blue glow that is all too familiar to those who have braved the trials of New Island. Leaping to his feet, Sandslash begins to maul its trainer, who wails in pain and terror, while Surge and several other League staff members attempt to subdue it. Ash, however, could not seem to care less, strolling over to Meowth and taking hold of him. The pair then teleport away without a word, though none are needed, as this battle has sent a message to Ash's friends that his words up until this point had not fully conveyed. This person truly is not Ash, for Ash would never have done what they had just saw.
That does it for this part, and I hope you all enjoyed dipping your toe into the Indigo League, because next time, we'll be seriously throwing into the deep end.
Before we sign off though, I have a few questions for you. How do you feel now that we have confirmed that Ash really isn't Ash, or even Mewtwo anymore? What do you think about the reveal of the connection between Pierce and Silver? And do you think that this means Pierce can be trusted, or are we judging him too harshly only because of his father? Who will ultimately win the league for the chance to challenge Lance? And what is the true goal of this mysterious entity that is wearing Ash's face? You will have to find all of that and more out next time on my channel for the finale.
For now, it's time to sign out by thanking our channel's main supporters, which you can join the rank sub by becoming a channel member or preferably a patron. B. Adrian Carr, Daniel Smith, Inebriated, Coder SV3, John Sullivan, Trent Rouse, Dark Shadows, Pokemon Trainer Cam, River Joy, Arcana of the Heart, Jay Ray, Infernate Beast 326, Omar Cousins, Stephen Norton, Vegeta What Ifs, Justin Covington, Shao P, Daniel Wolfdog 31, Cordell Sanders, and Crimson Manifesto. As always, your aid helps me make my videos above and beyond with stuff like new custom art for thumbnails and visuals, and means the world to me. But with that said, be sure to take care of yourselves and the world around you. And as always, go beyond plus ultra. And I'll see you guys next time.